Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Simon joining you with Roddy Lau, and Taz Akhtar will be with us remotely. Today we will be discussing the Freedom March that took place a week ago today, Saturday. That's last Saturday.
Also, we are going to talk a little bit about, give our some not really expert opinion about the new bill proposed by the Conservative Party, the Conservative government, to limit protest, and also a little bit about damaging memorials and statues.
Excellent. So that's the Police, Crime, Sentencing, and Courts Bill 2021. Protest Powers fact sheet is what we'll be reading from, as well as a little bit about the bill itself. It's a pretty important bill because, having attended this Freedom March last week, we were able to witness what I think was a very peaceful, powerful protest. We were also fortunate enough to find Taz out in the mix, not realizing that he was going to be out at the march, and we took some really good photos and some videos, and I think it's important that we all kind of discuss how this might impact such an important march.
Yes.
What are your thoughts, Taz? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. Yeah, I'm looking at the bill and just thinking about overreaches of power. Kind of just looking at it from that kind of...
You know what I'm really surprised about? I'm surprised that this is coming from a conservative government, you know? Really? Yeah, you're laughing. Why are you laughing?
Well, it's something hard to get my head around about the so-called conservative government.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm from America. Conservative governments look a lot different than what they do in the UK, without a doubt.
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
It's just really bizarre to see the conservative government, the ministers came out publicly to defend Keynesianism and all of the money printing machine, and now have this kind of draconian bill.
Right. I think I understand the intent behind it. You know, would you say, in your opinion, it seems to me the intent behind this would be driven by groups like Antifa, you know, domestic terrorist groups like Antifa, who are destroying public property, burning down buildings, at least in the USA. You know, maybe across the pond they're seeing that kind of stuff and thinking, wow, you know, Portland, Oregon has been at war for an entire year in its streets, and we don't want that here. And maybe that's what the purpose of this bill is for. Would you think?
I don't think it's only initiated from the peaceful protest, put in quotation mark,
right,
across the pond. We also saw something similar here.
Right, but not on the scale, right? Is that?
Yes, but it's still getting quite bad. Like last summer, during the Black Lives Matter protests, get a police horse bolted, throwing bicycles into the crowd.
Right.
And also the year before Extinction Rebellion. I think that's the time before you came here. I still
right.
can.
Right. Well, I think I was here for part of the Extinction Rebellion. Taz, if you're hearing us, give me a clue about your experience with the Extinction Rebellion. Were you present with that, or did you have any oversight?
I didn't see too much, but it's kind of a similar idea. There were protests in London, but it's very hard to get a gauge of what actually happened unless you see it, because you're going to only see it through the lens of the mainstream media. So unless you actually are on the ground, it's very hard to kind of get a different perspective.
Actually, I saw and witnessed the Extinction Rebellion protest the year before.
And?
Yeah.
Mostly peaceful? Or is it Portland, Oregon, mostly peaceful?
No, it's mostly peaceful in the sense of which they don't fight, but
right.
They are very disruptive.
Well, okay, but let's break this down for the people listening. Disruptive in what sense? Because we can talk about connotations or denotations, and I think it's important to know, like, maybe some people think disruption is, you know, going down a street holding a sign, where other people might think disruption is, you know, burning a building down. Now, personally, I think that's probably more than disruption, but some level of disruption is necessary in direct action, wouldn't you say?
Right. It's very different, I would say. I'm going to church in Westminster.
Sure.
So there was a massive gathering at that time in Westminster. What they basically did is block the roads in
Right.
Parliament Square, and I think including a few bridges as well. So even like, I don't know about ambulance. I think there are definitely accidents in
Right.
ambulances are blocked.
Okay.
Also like,
But and that's fine. I understand that, but let's get some context here. In the early days, protests were a direct action form to let the leaders know, hey, we're not happy. How are you able to impact meaningful change without being able to shut down a street or two, especially if you submit to do this? Say you submit to be able to protest and they understand that some streets are going to be shut down. That's a lot different than perhaps people just showing up every day in a city and just blocking roads and setting fire to things, correct?
I think the main difference here is how long it lasts. It's like you block a street like 2-3 hours, maybe a day.
Right.
It can be justified, but what they
Right.
did before is blocked at least a week, if
Wow.
I
Okay.
remember.
So
right.
a week straight is definitely, I mean,
I
that's...
can't exactly remember that. So
Right.
maybe.
But is that any more or less disruption than what COVID lockdowns are causing for people in their lives, currently? I mean, we're going now on a year's worth of lockdown and disruption. So couldn't an argument be made is, that, hey, you're focused on disruption of things that last less than a week. What about the disruption that lasted an entire year?
Well, I think there are definitely similarities there. Well, I don't think I should give any credit for the government for that. Well, I don't want to go down the whole COVID.
Maybe we do another episode on
Yeah,
that.
that's what I'm
specifically.
thinking.
I guess my point is, like, disruption is a fact of life. Okay, wouldn't you say,
Yeah.
Taz? Disruption is a fact of life. The
Yes.
government uses disruption for our safety.
Yeah. I think it's hard to draw the line. It's going to be some sort of compromise. You want to make your voices heard. So
Right.
you need to be at least somewhat disruptive, but
Right.
I think you have to respect property rights and.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
No, I've never been of the opinion like Antifa or any of the hardcore quote unquote Black Lives Matter movements, where property needs to be stolen or broken or set to fire. I don't think that helps the cause at all in any way, shape, or form. But let's take a close look at this police crime bill and really get to it, because the reason I bring these things up is because looking at it initially, when I take a first glance and I'm at the fact sheet, and Roddy, you'll be covering kind of the actual bill itself.
Yes.
I see very, very broad terms, and broad terms are problematic. When you have broadly defined terms in many contracts and contract law, that will make certain parts of a section or line. It will negate it. It'll cancel it out because the terms are too broad, and you can't really define what those broad terms are, except for the precedent to be set in the courts of law. And then if the wrong person interprets it the wrong way, you've got a poor precedent, and that's something you see in America being done constantly. So let's just go over some of those.
I think I have like a caveat there.
Sure.
Like in the UK, the legal system is quite different compared to America.
Right.
So our court is not as powerful as the American courts, because we have the doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty.
Right.
So if this bill passed, then I guess there won't be so much like legal challenge or like interpretation problem.
Right. Well, so then my question to you is then who defines the implementation? Because certainly, when you're talking about widen the range of conditions that police can impose on static protests to match existing police powers to impose conditions on marches, what does that mean?
I don't know.
I mean, that's it's a very broad term. So
Yes.
that leaves it up to the police to say, hey, well, we think we need these powers to impose these conditions on the marches, right?
I think if your terms are not well defined, they can be easily bastardized by people of power.
Right,
Maybe
and then
not now, but in the future, I mean, it's a bit like what we're saying about sexual harassment. This is a definite problem, but if you're going to broaden it too much, it actually debases the people who have been harassed.
Well, right, but then anybody that's a serious victim of something
Exactly.
is now sharing a category with someone else who's just complaining or triggered by something that they feel shouldn't have happened, when it may not actually be any real offense or any real crime or any real, you know, how you perceive something is how you perceive something. And there is some objective truth between whether it actually is that way or whether it's just you perceiving it, and whether the person intended to create that harmful action. So, you know, and we're going to show you in this breakdown of this law here where there's plenty of room for that, for people to interpret, you know, what are necessary powers, and for people to interpret you know, what is disruption, and I feel like that is problematic. So
yes, should I? Yeah, I think I should read a little bit.
Yeah, let's just go on and get right into it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm going to read a little bit this bill. Definitely, I'm not a legal expert in any sense.
Right. For that, by the way, let's just, before we get too far in this, why don't I go ahead and say I'm in history and philosophy of science degree with UCL. Roddy, you are?
Yeah, I'm reading philosophy, so I guess my English language skill is good enough.
And then Taz?
I'm working in education.
Excellent. So we've got people with a range of histories here. I have a criminal justice degree. Excuse me, and come from law enforcement. I was in the Army for 10 years, 5 years as law enforcement. And so let's go ahead and get into some of the sections of this bill and exactly explain to it, and then we'll talk about Bristol and their response to this bill, and hopefully this will make a little bit more sense.
Yes, I think the first thing, I just read a little bit about the bill and how big it is. Article 54, the title is Imposing Conditions on Public Processions. It's basically an amendment to an existing law, legislation to the Public Order Act 1986.
And so what that Public Order Act, basically, it sets down a framework of how people can respond in certain situations, protests, how they're supposed to behave in public, and there's just a lot of sections behind it, and it's been around for many years now, but this is in essence just revisions to this bill, which, as you will see, seem to restrict freedoms.
Yes, the one of the amendment is insert is in the case of a procession in England and Wales, the noise generated by persons taking part in the procession may result in serious disruption to activities of an organization which are carried on in the vicinity of the procession.
Now, in the case of the procession in England and Wales, the noise generated by persons taking part in the procession may have a relevant impact on persons in the vicinity of the procession, and that impact may be significant, or, in the words following paragraph B, after disruption, insert impact. So what this is essentially doing is, scroll back up there for me, Roddy, or stay right there. So what this is essentially doing is now saying, basically, look, if you have a procession in England or Wales and you're generating noise, and that noise disrupts activities of any organization in that vicinity, that now this is allegedly a violation of law.
Yeah.
For which you can be penalized. Now, there's no, as far as I see, there's no decibel level given. Okay, there's no metric used.
There's a little bit description there.
Right. Okay. So there's a description, and we'll get to that. But that's not a metric. It's subjective, and you'll see when we read this. Go ahead.
It says what is like loud noise, noise generated by persons taking part in basic public protests. It may result in the intimidation or harassment of persons of reasonable firmness with the characteristics of persons likely to be in the vicinity.
It may cause such persons to suffer serious unease, alarm, or distress. So let's just stop right there, because that's really all we want to read from that excerpt right there. But let's go back to that last line and say, it may cause stay right there. It may cause such persons to suffer serious unease, alarm, or distress.
Yeah.
Do you find that alarming right there?
Yeah, I'm thinking, well, like if this law will be applied equally, which I have some reserve for that, does it mean like if, let's say, let's say like if a group of pro-abortion activists go into a Catholic church,
right?
So does it mean like they come protest of the church?
I mean, I feel that if it's an equal law, right? Like if what about if you're out of school and you're a group that has a speaker and you have people come in and stand up in the middle of that speaker's speech and start shouting and yelling and screaming with signs, because they're opposing that person. Is that something also that we would be, that, because I would feel serious unease in that. What about the speaker? I feel like the speaker would suffer serious unease, alarm, or distress.
Yeah, or like just think about like in our university, we had probably not only at UCL but also other institutions, there are like Antifa coming out like protesting a speaker.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I feel this is just a rabbit hole of a bill right here. We are literally digging our own grave on this one when we say it causes persons to so how do you attribute serious? Can you go back to that, please?
Okay.
Scroll back to it, just stay there. How do you attribute serious unease and alarm or distress to somebody? Do they need to go to a psychiatrist or to some psychologist and tell them their experiences and be rated and interviewed? Or
I think we can read just a little bit later, like say how deep the rabbit hole can go.
I mean, it's already off to a very deep start, so let's just continue on in this.
Yeah, I think protests, I'm not personally a fan of protests, but you may need it in some cases, the whole idea.
Well, okay, dig into that. Why are you not a fan of protests?
Personally, I think people should kind of look within for change and control what they can do.
Sure, but part of protest is what?
Right?
Part of protest is what? Accountability if you believe there's not accountability. One of the worst things that we can allow in this situation or this world that we live in is for any leadership to not have accountability. The minute that leadership knows that they're not accountable is the minute that they do whatever they want, whenever they want, right? So direct action, protest, is a form of accountability. The whole point is to literally make leadership feel uneasy, okay? That the only thing that you have in a leadership position is to feel uneasy. So I remember my time back in the United States military, all right? I'm going to tell you a story, and hopefully this helps frame it in the listener's mind. So when I was a criminal investigator, I had a gold badge and a gun, right? And you both have seen the credentials, so this is a true story. When I was given that gold badge and the gun, I didn't feel any different. As a matter of fact, I felt more insecure in my power base because now I was expected to live at a higher standard effectively and investigate people for their wrongdoings, knowing full well that I've done wrong things in my past. So it actually left me feeling less powerful. Okay, now a lot of these quote unquote leaders know they're not powerful people, they're just in positions of power. They know that they're not good leaders, okay? They know they've been elected because they have certain things in their past that make them capable of being coerced or whatever it is. But very few of these leaders are elected because they're exceptional leaders, in my opinion. Now that's my view, okay? This bill right here allows them to feel comfortable because now they don't have to suffer any blowback from a crowd of direct activists who say, we're not happy with the job you're doing. And all they have to say is, I'm suffering serious unease, alarm, or distress, or any one of their friends out in that crowd or the police or anyone.
Yeah, it's similar to cancelling people or silencing your or criticize.
Right.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Even if you don't like the idea, we should have the idea where people can criticize them.
Right. So you're now helping to solidify their power. Is that really what we want? Is leaders being able to feel more secure and more powerful in their positions?
And not accountable to the people.
Right, and not accountable to the people, or do we want them to feel the heat, to feel the
maybe
pressure?
you see like this bill is getting spicy and more spicy.
Right. I mean, we're not even a couple lines in. We're 15 lines into this thing.
Yeah. Well, let's see. 4:12. What they want to insert.
And this is line 20. If you all want to follow.
Yeah.
along.
Yeah. I will put the screenshot in the video later. The Secretary of State may, by regulation, make provisions about the meaning for the purpose of this section of serious disruption to the activities of an organization which are carried on in the vicinity of public possession, or serious disruption to the life of the community.
Great. So it sounds like the Secretary of State may now define that any way they want through regulations, is what it sounds like.
Yes, and regulation is, well, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of the British political system.
Right. That's an entire podcast series of its own.
A few, I guess.
Yeah. Well, so we're planning on doing, just so you listeners know out there, whenever we talk about putting a pin in it, and this is one of those situations where we're putting a pin in it. Later on, we will have podcasts going down those rabbit holes.
Yes.
In case you're curious. So, British Parliament is definitely one we're going to put a pin in, and as well, American system.
Yes,
congressional system.
Well, that's one reading like this legislation and bills. Like when I see something saying Secretary of State, and my feeling is no. It's when that phrase appears, basically giving more power to the state.
Right, absolutely. No, 100% that is more power in the hands of the state. So now you've already got subjective terminology in here that can be interpreted, and now you're giving the ability for the Secretary of State to basically regulate any which way they want how this can be interpreted. Just nothing about this feels like it's going to benefit the people.
I mean, I'm sure there's other governments that would like to expand their power.
This is an expansion of power. Bold expansion of power.
What I'm saying is there are other people who sit on different political spectrums who are licking their lips at this idea.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. And and I got to hand it to Antifa and all you extremist organizations out there, wherever you're from and whoever's funding you, you're really handing it to the governments of the world right here. I mean, this by your willful disobedience of laws and destruction of property and and your belief in your cause, all you're doing is helping to tighten the noose around the neck of the people. So continue on. I mean, if this is what your goal is, is to put everybody in a noose, then this is the way to do it, because now people are seeing this kind of disruption and saying, well, maybe it's a good thing that we have laws to prevent disruption.
I guess this law may even backfire to conservatives in the future.
Oh, 100% this will backfire to the conservatives. But I'll say this, in American politics, the Conservative Party and the Democratic Party, right, the Republicans and the Democrats, they have a long history of enacting policy against each other to try and best one another, only to have it backfire in their face.
Remember the
so much so that it makes you wonder if there's actually a uniparty and they're all just working in cahoots.
Remember the Supreme Court judge confirmation filibuster ended in the Senate.
Right.
What Democrats ended it.
Yeah.
What happened to the Democrats? The Republic confirmed ACB.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And now there's Joe Biden's talking about filibustering and it being bad, and his entire 40 some years in office was spent defending it.
I think
and
it's
using
120. He said
stop. Okay, let's continue on with just this bill just a little bit more. We'll spend another couple of minutes on it, and then we're going to go to the video of the Freedom March, and we're just going to look at the video, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some of these excerpts that we've already highlighted and show you why we think it's problematic.
Oh, here.
Okay, so this is the obstruction of vehicular access to Parliament. I'll get this one.
Okay.
In section 142 alpha, and this is on line 25, part 57, other controlled areas in the vicinity of the Palace of Westminster. And this is specifically prohibits, the obstruction of vehicular access. And I can see why this kind of might be a good idea, right? For EMS and things like that. But why can't we just have the common sense when we see EMS vehicles or emergency vehicles, if we're protesters, to let them through, and civilian traffic just gets stopped? And this is, it's reserved for Cannon Row, Parliament Street, Derby Gate, Parliament Square. But I guess the point here is what, Roddy? Like, this is where our so-called leadership resides, right? I mean, these are the people we're trying to make uncomfortable with our direct action.
Well, yes, it basically says, if I don't want you to protest near the parliament, then you can protest near the parliament. What's the point of protesting?
That's exactly the question.
Are they saying, like, if you want to protest, okay, you can't go to somewhere you can disrupt businesses?
Well, you can't go to the middle of Hyde Park and protest the squirrels. I mean, what? Really?
But I think it comes from different. I think it starts at low level culturally, banning people and this kind of ideas of conformity and lack of freedom of expression, and that filters through, and then people can be easily fooled into saying,
right.
This is for the good, right?
Make no mistake, friends, I don't see this as being for the greater good. I see this as being good for the people who don't want to feel uncomfortable by your direct action.
But my point is, if you cannot hold a position where you think this is bad for the government,
right?
But it's good in the culture wars, or it's good for kind of to cancel people who don't share your views. If you're of the kind that wants to cancel people, then
right,
kind of you're not on the side of freedom.
And so that's what we have to think.
If somebody's using it against you, you can't.
Is this a camp of people who wants to cancel freedoms? And is this the purpose of this bill? Let's take a look at the Bristol situation and kind of analyze that in reference to this. Tell us what you know about the Bristol situation.
What time of year is there? There are like 3 days protest in Bristol. Is it 3 days? Can you fact check me quickly?
I'll look that up. Yeah.
Okay.
But carry on.
That's lasting a few days. And then there is a police station vandalized, and I think a few police cars set on fire.
Right.
And I think.
What the purpose of this was what? Let's it's kill the bill, right?
Yeah.
That's what.
Yeah, that's what the bill referred to.
And so, if you're not aware, this is the bill that they're referring to. So, this is where I think we have to be careful about what we say and what we do, right? Because everything that we say and that we do has a consequence, okay? And we have to be smart enough to understand how to get to where we want to go, okay? Do you think that lighting cop cars on fire, breaking out, smashing out their windows, do you think that helps the situation? Yes or no, Roddy? Go ahead. And then we'll go with Taz. Yes or no? No?
Yeah.
You don't think it helps your situation?
No.
Okay. Taz?
I think it will give the fuel to the people who want to kind of, and the mainstream or anybody who wants to paint you in a bad light.
Right.
So you're giving them fuel, you're giving them reason.
100%. Okay, so
right?
so this is one of the toughest things about direct action, right? You have to be in this for the right reasons. You have to do these things for the right reasons, and you have to act with the same energy that you want back from the situation. If you want bad energy from the situation, break out cop cars, light them on fire, okay? Because those are bad actions. And this is where we're going to have to eventually put a pin in it and come back to good and bad and morality, because in a postmodern world, that's allegedly relative, and I'm here to tell you it's not. You reap what you sow, and that's biblical. So in this situation, you have to be very careful about the actions you take. If you're not getting the results you want, you probably don't want to escalate tensions by committing crimes. Okay, we're in revolutions of science or governments or anything. You don't want to jump right to quote unquote deadly force, right? Police officers aren't even supposed to do it. They have levels of force, right? They're supposed to react appropriately to the situation, not go right to deadly force. Okay, So same thing with protesters. We don't want to jump right to rioting and looting and things like that.
Yeah, that's another thing I'm thinking. What will happen next? Like after we got this, like you can't be too noisy.
Right.
Like, will the next time it says we can like send into the riot police,
Right.
when even before the protest started,
Right.
if there are like, if we say like when the Secretary of State safely assumes there will be violence.
Right. If they safely assume that, or if the protests start and it starts to get too noisy, right? Like,
Yeah.
So here is kind of exactly how it proceeds. Is you clash with violence against a bill like this, and then all you really do is you seem to reinforce the point for the necessity of a bill like this, and that's a terrible tragedy, because you've in essence kind of predicted the outcome that you didn't want by following the actions that you should not have taken.
I think it's like a cycle of violence, like a feedback loop where if you kind of have that mindset, then you're going to be violent, the other people are going to be violent back to you, and it's like a chicken and egg, who came first, who started it, and
Right.
it's like a never-ending
Someone
cycle.
has to stop that.
Someone has to stop
Yeah,
and say, look,
100%.
we need
Right.
civility, and that's
Right.
that.
And someone has to turn the other cheek, and this is another biblical passage, right? Turn the other cheek. Why? Okay, because that's the only way it stops. And of course, if the cheek keeps getting slapped, then there may be a time for more appropriate action. But you have to stop the cycle, and if you're doing the same actions over and over, that's not going to lead to a different result. So we know that. So in this situation, the wrong thing to do is start lighting things on fire. And this is another thing we'll have to put a pin in, because when it comes to protest, there's obviously going to be bad actors. Maybe you all have heard about that before. People have talked about it, that there's bad actors in protests and people that go and incite violence to make the movement look bad. Well, if that's the case, then you suffer from a problem of accountability in your protests and your organizations. And you need to be better about, I guess you would call, kind of finding out who's in your movement, and
Yeah.
and preventing bad actors from getting in, and the only way to do that is to have accountability,
I completely agree.
organizational accountability.
I completely agree. It's a kind of self-policing kind of action to basically,
Right,
if
self-policing.
someone, if someone, let's say, to be honest, I only attended one protest in my life,
Right.
and it's out of the Chinese embassy.
Oh wow, yeah. How was that? Yeah.
Well, that's largely peaceful. I guess
Yeah.
In this field, the Chinese embassy can definitely say it's annoying or intimidating,
Right.
or feeling stress
Yeah.
from the people calling out of their genocide.
Right.
Yeah, that's another pin, I guess. Talking
Yeah,
about
that will have. So there's a lot of pins, as you can see already. But getting back to the point, is where in all of this do we see, where do we see this as a benefit to the people if we're not self-policing? And that's really the most important aspect of any movement or any social condition or anything really in society, is self-policing. We have lost the people who self-police and police others, which is why most governments in the world have centralized and outsourced self-policing to policing institutions. And then when you do that, you create this dichotomy, where now you have two opposing sides, and the problems are inherent in the centralization of these police powers, because they have to be, because now you create a group that's different from the other group and sets that different group upon the first group to police it. It's different when you police yourselves, right? The power struggle is different, the authority is different, and so especially in these protests, if you can't police yourselves, guess who's going to police you?
But I think it could kind of be seen as unfair to treat the group of protesters as a policing themselves unit, because I don't think you can't control other people's
Well,
actions.
hold on. Let's break that down, because you certainly can. In the protests in D.C. On January 6th, when it came to the people entering into the Congress building, there definitely were real Trump supporters policing those who were making trouble. And as a matter of fact, several of them got in fisticuffs with the people trying to break windows and other things. Now, none of that was shown on mainstream media, but it did occur. Had there have been more people that were more brazen enough to stand up to these bad actors, you might not had a situation where anybody entered the building at all. And as a matter of fact, that's why they started removing jersey barriers and other things, is to allow and ushering people in, is because there were too many people saying no, don't do this. If you're going to be an effective social movement of direct action, you really need to police yourselves, and that starts with having a constitution of what you're for and what you're not for. And the minute you see someone doing something that you are not for, excising them from the group ASAP.
I guess it should be fairly straightforward. Like those who are perpetrating violence, it's always a minority, except like Extinction Rebellion and Antifa.
Right, but when we say minority, we obviously are not meaning a minority as in like a BAME, Black, Asian, Middle Eastern, something like that. But it's a minority, like a minor percent of the populace. But that's literally, that is all it takes, is one bad apple to ruin the whole basket, right? With that, why don't we start that video and then we can...
I think I want to just talk a little bit more, like where the... Oh, okay. Where the rationale is from? Like this bill is designed to basically end Extinction Rebellion, this sort of protest.
Right.
Because
but it's not just going to end that. That level of. It might have been started for that, but it's not just going to affect that type of protest.
Yeah, that's a kind of problem. It's saying like, if I'm going to ban murder, then murder will be gone.
I mean, I think it's more than that. It's like you take a legitimate problem in life, and then you kind of have people who have different styles of solutions. And a lot of the solutions that sound quote unquote good are kind of huge overreach. I mean, if you want to stop,
huge overreach, and we know this.
Like, you want to stop. I don't know, anything like I mean, people get into domestic violence. You could say nobody. Let's segregate men and women totally. There'll be no X, Y, and Z.
Right, but it's like you're not solving it right. That you're not addressing the root problem. And I think between the three of us, we have enough experience to know that this cycle repeats. Okay, and the only thing that governments of the world rely on is that generations come and go and die, while governments maintain repositories of lessons learned on standing up authoritarian or totalitarian governments where it's heavily dictatorships in essence, right? Like, I mean, let's face it, we're marching slowly away from liberty. Every day we continue on this path in the West, where we see bills like this that are so open and subjective that anyone who comes in can use these to their own benefit and against the will of the people.
You remember if this bill is passed, and just imagine in the next 4 years, Labour come in, and then they said, okay, I'm going to use this bill. Even you think about, let's just imagine Labour has a minority government.
Right.
This bill is still on the statute book, and then whoever gets into power can just appoint
and
the
this
Home
goes
Secretary to redefine the definition.
Right, and this goes back to the point where I was saying this is in America. It's the same thing. Why it seems more like a uniparty than two separate parties, because they keep making these same quote unquote mistakes about bringing in bad policy and then having it used against them later on. But at the end of the day, the people who really suffer, it's not Congress, it's not the president, it's not the executive branch, it's not the judicial branch, right? Who is it? It's the people. Yeah. And this is one of those bills that looks like, to me, the benefactors of the pain, right, is going to be who? Like the
people who can't address their grievances in the end.
Right. Well, yeah, who want to address their grievances are going to have to go out in a field somewhere with the squirrels and birds.
And I was just saying, it's not that Labour particularly are bad, because you said Labour will get the power.
Right.
It's
no, but that's the point, right?
Government, they have a lot of good people in there who are for good social justice causes, but the fact that you have bigger government, you have more power, and I think power is the corrupting agent.
Right.
So
and
if you want to reduce the amount of power, it's nothing to do with good or bad or Labour.
It is the corrupting agent, right?
And especially if somebody wants more control.
Right. It has everything to do with the fact that right now we have a conservative government, and they're laying the groundwork for them to have a very bad ending when labor takes control again in the future, which obviously they're going to at some point. But again,
bad labor.
Right. Again, it's all about the corrupting agent being power, and the people right now, by allowing something like this to happen, are allowing the power to be centralized more by the government, and that's a bad thing. But what I really want to know is, okay, so I've said, or at least we've agreed, that lighting police cars on fire is not the answer. So then what? So how do? So what's the next reasonable step then when you don't want this bill to pass and no one's listening? What's the next reasonable step?
Sorry, what you mean? Like,
if we can't light police cruisers on fire to protest this bill, what can we do that puts the pressure on?
Well, I think probably the most straightforward. I don't know how effective will be is to write to your MP.
Right. Okay.
If we just bombard their email box with we don't want this bill to pass.
Right.
If you vote for it, then
I'm not going to be voting for you next time.
Yeah, even I'm going to vote for Penguin, I'm not going to vote for you.
Right. Okay. So that's one. Another solution, perhaps.
But people need to be educated. I think that's always a good idea of overreaches of power. But the problem is, if those people in power are educating, that's where it gets into a bit of a...
Yeah, but what are we doing for direct action if we can't light cruisers on fire? That's my question to you. What else are you going to do besides educate them? What do you know?
It's very difficult to say. I think it's like
an
inherent problem that's not easy to solve.
Right.
But I would say always go for educate people or see that less government, less power, less control is seen as a good thing. So liberty, freedom.
Right. Okay, so we've got on the board right now, write the MPs and bombard their inbox, and then we've got educate them.
I guess another way, I don't know why
Do I get away?
Sorry?
Do I get to say away? Oh, I thought we were taking turns here. I was going to go you, and then me. No? You're skipping me? All right, I'll cede my turn to you.
Maybe we want to say the same thing.
Maybe. Go ahead. I'll let you know.
There should be petitions on the Parliament website already.
I was going to go something similar to that, but here's what I was thinking. And if anyone's out there is listening that is a blockchain expert, I'd love to get in touch with you. Love to do an interview with you. Blockchain is the future, in my opinion, not necessarily for cryptocurrency or currency. We'll put a pin in that because that's another thing we need to talk about. Cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin. Who owns the processing power? Is it really decentralized, etc.? So we'll be wrapping up here soon in another couple of minutes. But before we get to that, I'd say my suggestion would be if you're into distributed ledgers, blockchain, what we need is a system whereby everyone gets a number, an identifying number on a blockchain. Once they are officially able to vote, and they use smart contracts in order to know when you're born, and then that smart contract traces when you're able to vote, and use smart contracts if you have any violations that will prevent you to vote. So all of those things are used, smart contracts, to prevent certain people from voting who have broken laws or whatever your voting laws, however those work. And then if you become the legal age in accordance with the law, that smart contract kicks in. You're now able to vote, and it contacts you personally. Hey, here's who you can vote for. All the people's manifestos are on the blockchain, as well as all the reported actions are on the blockchain. All the reported bills are on the blockchain. You can go to one place, you can research them, and you can cast their vote. And I feel like if you do that, there is a very minimal chance of any kind of tampering with voting, so that you will have true accountability of the vote. And that, again, is the most important thing, in my opinion, is the vote. But if you can't have security in your vote, then it's a moot point. So that would have been my suggestion.
Yes.
It's time to step forward with blockchain and distributed ledgers.
I just looked up the petition website. We already have almost
229,000.
Yeah.
Oh wow! So we have 230,000 signatures on the petition for "Do not restrict our rights to peacefully protest." Can we play that video now in our final moments and just kind of wind down this?
Yep.
this hour-long conversation here on podcast,
Yeah, of course.
and then we can just kind of point out some things about the peaceful protest.
Yes.
A
real
real
peaceful protest.
Well, it was. It was not a quote peaceful protest. It's not a CNN peaceful protest. It's a peaceful protest.
Peaceful but furious.
Yeah, I saw no one here being violent.
Like what the CNN said, peaceful but fiery protest. That's what CNN, but not this one.
Yeah, okay, so now we're looking at the protest video. Let's get a little bit of sound here so I can...
Okay.
Just a little bit. Yeah, perfect. Alright, so we're watching this video and we're now seeing the people marching. We do see one person with a Monero flag, which I think is kind of cool. I was incorrect when I said that it's a public and private. It is only a private currency, digital currency. And that's meaning it's a secure, private, anonymous currency, which is pretty cool. But I think we do kind of need some public cryptocurrency. It's going to be important in the future, and we can talk about that. Put another pin in that one. So what we see right now is people marching. They're peaceful, and I lost the sound here, but
maybe
there we go. Right there is good. Now we have them yelling freedom. And that's kind of important because what was your experience when you heard them yelling freedom? It got loud, didn't it?
Yeah,
right.
It did.
Yeah. And just to clarify, this was a march on the 20th, right?
This was a week ago. Yep. Through Green Park. Yep. So this was coming through Green Park at the time, but as far as I know, this march wound all the way around Parliament. It wound all the way around the square there where the palace is, Buckingham Palace. It went on for about 15 minutes marching just through Green Park. Now there's a throughway in Green Park, which is a pathway. I know because I go to feed the squirrels, and it's about 4 to 5 people wide. You can walk on this, I would say, maybe at the most. And so the people were filing through Green Park on this thoroughfare, and it took about 15 minutes for everybody to file through before we left the scene and called it a wrap. But even then, there were still people kind of lollygagging in the rear. There was a massive break in contact, so I'm not sure how many more people were intending to file through there. But biggest thing about it was the freedom part, I think, is where I want to highlight. And what do you think about that experience? I felt chills, honestly. I felt proud of humanity. I felt chills. They were shouting freedom, freedom, and it got pretty loud.
Yes.
And it was the demographics seemed to be a lot of them were younger, but it was a mixture of ages actually. I couldn't tell you the average age, but all different races coming together as well.
I saw a grandma like working with the...
Right, yeah, you saw a grandma? Seriously? You did? I think that's wonderful. Yeah, no, I mean, it was a very diverse group, and we're a diverse group, we're on this podcast. We're a diverse group. We saw a diverse
group. We are known as the milkshake shows.
Yeah, no, we're not known as the milkshake show. This is the Paladin podcast. We'll have to edit that out probably. You had all your major groups there represented, all your minor groups there represented. I saw, people were very concerned about the crisis in regard to the children and their learning experience. I think we talked to some people. Did you talk to anyone out there while you were out there?
Yeah, I talked to a few people and they were worried about the effect it could have on the children and the hidden effect. So the actual cure being worse than the actual... Yeah, so the cure being actually worse than the disease potentially, which I think is a really good point, right? And we have to factor in all of... I mean, not many people there were saying that there's no problem with corona, but it was just that in stopping people, we don't know the future effects it's going to have, and we need to have a balanced argument without shutting people up
100%.
And evil. And
I think that's we're past the point where it's like, oh, coronavirus isn't a real thing. Like, anyone saying that is either very ignorant or is, in my personal opinion, a disruptor of the movement. But I think we have to be honest with ourselves and say, look, coronavirus, the science, if we're going to follow it, which I don't believe we have in a lot of the situations, but if we're going to follow it, we need to understand that it affects the people who are very old, and generally very sick, you know, with 2 and 3 comorbidities, which are serious adverse, you know, health conditions. So, you know, I think the median age, I think, was said to be 75 or 76 of the people dying, and the average life expectancy of, you know, human beings is anywhere in those countries where they were dying was 72 to 75. I think it ranged. So in essence, what you have is people, right, in the Western countries, you have people living past the, you know, the life expectancy, and they're dying, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, sure, they had COVID, but was that the reason, or is it just, you know, they're already past the average life expectancy, so how much more life did they have to live, you know?
Here's a correction. The median age of death due to COVID-19 and involving in COVID-19 are above life expectancy in the UK for male and female, and the mean involving and due to COVID-19 is just a little bit lower than the average life expectancy in the UK. I have another view on that. Probably
sure.
I will just reserve that for next time.
Right.
So about whether the trade-off makes.
Yeah, that's a big
so
pin in it right there, the trade-off. And this is a lot of where people are going to lose probably their marbles when we discuss the trade-off. But realistically, we need to talk utility. We need to talk, you know, who the average contributor is to the economy, and how economies make up governments, you know, like how the people and their product makes up the success of a government. So I don't think it's fair to cast people who have that discussion, those are the hard answers, and to cast them as insensitive or they hate grandma. Like that's not true.
Yeah.
I'm not a utilitarian in any sense, but I think the difficult trade-off is we have to make a decision between two bad decisions.
Right, exactly. And which one's the better of the bad decisions to make?
No, that's a hard choice.
It is a hard choice. And that's why we're
by definition, right?
Right, that's why we're going to address it on probably a different occasion, because there's a lot to unpack there.
There are lots of these kind of scenarios when the government or the leaders, even like individuals, have to make a choice when we can't use absolute or more objective. No, I think objective is not the right word. Like have some kind of absolute moral laws. But we have to consult utilitarianism.
Right.
This kind of situation, it's a kind of a big caveat, but it's a moral question. I'm thinking quite a long time now, whether which kind of decision we have to make.
Right.
Like in this kind of scenario, like if I'm in like Boris Johnson's shoes, but hopefully I'm maybe, I don't know.
Well, anything's possible. I mean, the guy, he was a reporter for a rag magazine, right? If I'm not mistaken, what was it?
Boris Johnson?
Yeah, he was a reporter for a rag magazine.
The Telegraph.
The Telegraph? Is that a rag or not?
Rag, what's that?
Rag is it's a name for like, you know, a magazine that's not really like a prominent.
No, the Telegraph is one of the prominent ones.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe in the.
Well, when I say rag, it's more like gossipy, I guess. You know, or so maybe you call it like a tabloid. Are you familiar with that term?
Yes.
Okay.
Meghan Markle.
Okay, so in America, a rag magazine or a tabloid is something that's very like, it's got a lot of what's the word I'm looking for here? Sensationalism, right? It's very sensational, right? So the front is covered with all these gossipy style, you know.
Oh, I see. No.
Is that not okay?
No. Boris Johnson worked in the Times and the Daily Telegraph, so.
Okay, the Daily Telegraph, is that a serious magazine in the UK, or is it more of a tabloid?
It's a newspaper.
Huh?
It's quite proper.
Okay,
paper.
all right,
Yeah,
perfect.
it's
Well, excuse my foreign ignorance. Okay, I'm.
Yeah, you American creep like.
I guess, yeah, I can't. I don't. All right. Well, see, you learn something new every day, man. Look, I've lived in now 4 different countries. All right, America, Kuwait, Italy, and now the UK. And you know, you learn as you go. I'm not expected to know everything. That's why I have the 2 resident experts who've lived here and know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Right? Anyway, it's right. Like come
in any case, you could be the prime minister. So let's get back to the topic.
Yeah, like
if you're in his shoes.
Yes, when I have to make a decision to whether to have lockdown or no lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
When facing these two different options.
Right.
I also think about whether I can adopt like kind of absolute moral rules. Like I'm trying to avoid any death.
Right.
So it's probably impossible.
Right.
If we don't have lockdown, people die from COVID.
Right.
And if we don't have if we do have a lockdown, then we have like suicide.
Well, then we have suicide, alcohol, depression.
Yeah,
right.
Even,
yeah. I mean,
like even just in the case of even like I choose, there are this amount of people died or this kind of amount of people suffer.
Right.
Then I still don't think a kind of absolute morality to save one person to torture 100 or 1,000 probably can't be justified.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean it's a hard choice, but I mean that's why these so-called leaders are in those positions to make the hard choices. I think what the wrong thing to do is to disavow or disable people from protesting in the streets when they disagree with the decisions being made. And that's the topic we're on. We are on the topic, right, of whether or not people are allowed to protest the situation. And right now what you're seeing is people protesting because they're unhappy about lockdown. And then you're getting a bill saying, hey, maybe we're going to restrict how you can protest.
But I think with the idea of the lockdown, the corona, a big problem is that you have political players on mainstream media who can quite easily portray somebody very quickly as bad and evil. So when some people have died, it's very easy to take them as people with blood on their hands.
Right.
Whereas if you lock people down, there's you're doing what you can, and people are in search of this overprotecting parental kind of.
Right, and that comes back to the
and
overreach of government, too much control, as well as the old adage that a lie can travel around the world twice before the truth even has time to lace up its boots. So
it's like the optics of people dying is just far worse.
Well,
so then
yeah.
I mean, directly dying is too easy to sensationalize in the media.
But nobody's sensationalizing the fact that someone is hanging themselves right now because they're so depressed from lockdown that they can't take it.
Or even how to take the pills because maybe I will harm myself.
Right. So, or the people who are just overdosing on pills and alcohol because they just can't handle it. They can't deal.
Even gaining weight that may not be.
Or kids even. Kids taking their lives. That's so. We're gonna get into that in the future. I don't think this is the episode for that because I think we're now to the wind down point of this podcast, and we should carry on with more of that discussion on utilitarianism and deontology and how that all factors into decision making and what's best for the populace.
Yes.
Any parting shots? Anybody? Parting shots?
I don't have any.
No, I think, as far as our listeners, we'd like to thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. If you're still following up until this point, we appreciate it. I'd like to, again, make a call out to anybody that's in blockchain technology. Reach out to us. We'd like to do some podcasts on blockchain technology, specifically for accountability when it comes to social actions like voting and